Europe is now preparing militarily for 0 hour, and Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov has set the date as the year 2030, the year of the big explosion. But have you noticed that Ukraine has now started stirring up conflicts with its allies in the region and in the West? Before the date of this war, who was planning it? Zelensky? Today, we reveal to you the roadmap towards World War III and why Zelensky is threatening to open a new front that will turn the tables on everyone. How is that? Today's topic is up next. We'll take a break and return shortly. Stay tuned. Dear viewers, peace be upon you and God's mercy and blessings. Welcome to another installment today, God willing. As part of our opinion series, which this time, instead of focusing on Iran, we are focusing on reviewing the latest developments and updates that are happening. This conflict that has not ended yet and will not end except with a major destructive war. This ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine. The recent events in the Middle East may have drawn everyone's attention. People are turning away from what is happening in this war between Russia and Ukraine, despite all the important developments that have recently occurred in this issue and in this war between Russia and Ukraine. So, to give our dear viewers a general picture of this conflict, the war is of course still ongoing. Airstrikes are being exchanged, and the Ukrainian army has not completely collapsed yet. Russia is still making ground advances today. From time to time, it continues to take control of new Ukrainian territories, but the progress always remains slow. I mean, by just a few kilometers, given of course the vastness of Ukrainian territory, and also considering the determination of the Ukrainian army, which is of course supported by dozens of European countries. But despite this, it's only a matter of time. Russia is steadily moving toward achieving its set goal. So now, after Russia has taken control of 2 cities in the Donbas region, the Russian invasion continues, and today the talk is about the imminent collapse of the last Ukrainian strongholds in the Donbas region. And the observation, dear viewers, is that with every Russian military advance on Ukrainian territory, we find that the Ukrainian response this time is to target the Russian capital, Moscow. Recently, there was a very large drone attack on Moscow, and Russia also responded with an even bigger attack on the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. And the difference here, dear viewers, is that when the Russians strike, they use a variety of different weapons. They strike with drones and with various types of hypersonic missiles that cannot be intercepted. These air defense systems cannot intercept them, while the Ukrainian attack relies only on a large number of drones, which are mostly intercepted by Russian air defenses. And this happens easily. Of course, there are some hits, but they are very limited. For example, Ukraine launches a large number of drones, more than 200, 300 or even 500 drones, for example, and in the end, only 3 drones succeed in reaching the target. That's why we always find that Russian strikes are more powerful and more intense. For example, last night, Russian air defenses succeeded in shooting down more than 300 Ukrainian drones. They were targeting different areas inside Russia, including the capital, Moscow. Because 13 drones were shot down in Moscow alone, meaning they were targeting the Russian capital, Moscow. Meanwhile, there was no talk, of course, about drones that succeeded in hitting specific targets, or about injuries that resulted from shrapnel or anything like that. Not at all. And this means all of this happened, in one night, while recently these attacks have been repeated and ongoing over the past few weeks. About 2 days ago, the Russian capital Moscow was subjected to the most violent attack launched by Ukrainian forces in 2 years. The most violent attack in 2 years. The Russian air defenses succeeded in shooting down 194 drones, all of which were targeting the capital Moscow. The Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said that this is evidence of the high efficiency enjoyed by the Russian air defenses in repelling the drones. It is clear that Russia is building a very thick defensive wall, and this wall is specifically intended to protect the capital, Moscow. Russia knew that the Ukrainians would eventually target Moscow. They knew this, and that the Ukrainians would not accept the status quo. That's why Russia probably prepared for this scenario, with air defenses deployed at all levels, making it very difficult to penetrate these systems. The Russians continue, as I said, to make progress on the ground, even if it is very slow. But there is always progress. Russia is moving toward achieving its desired goal, which is to annex the remaining eastern territories in Ukraine. These are the areas that Russia wants to control and turn into Russian land, like the Donbas region and so on. Meanwhile, the Ukrainians, in order to cover up these losses, rely on drone attacks and make them a big headline for propaganda purposes. Ukraine strikes the capital Moscow, a headline that's very serious and grabs attention. What's strange is that this escalation means hitting Moscow itself. It came at a sensitive time when Russia was celebrating the great victory and holding celebrations and so on throughout these past weeks, even just today. Today, they are celebrating in Russia a day called Remembrance Day and mourning the day when the Soviet Union entered World War II. They call this day the Day of Mourning because the war claimed the lives of 27 million Soviet citizens at that time. And the Ukrainians are attacking Moscow on this day, of course, on this anniversary. So pay close attention. Today is dangerous, dear viewers. And I talked about this in many previous episodes before the start of this war on Iran, that the Europeans will never allow Ukraine to surrender now. What are they doing now? All this confrontation, all this resilience you see in Ukraine today, they are just trying to buy time, to gain more time, until the right conditions are in place in Europe, in these European countries, the NATO countries, to enter into a direct and full-scale war against the Russians. Which, as I explained to you earlier, that means it will be around the year 2030, maybe in 2028. Maybe after that, maybe even in 2030, depending on the indicators and military preparations throughout Europe, meaning it will likely happen in 2030. So today, just today, dear viewers, Grushko, who is the Deputy Foreign Minister of Russia, made an official statement saying that the European Union and NATO countries are preparing for a military confrontation against the Russians in 2030. Meaning they are preparing for a major war against Russia around the year 2030. He said that the main goal for the Europeans now is to achieve a strategic defeat for Russia. Also, just last week, the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, wrote an article in which he said that Europe is striving hard to buy time by all possible means, just to be ready for a major war against Russia. He said that this is likely to happen in 2030. This was said by the Russian foreign minister. But if you go back to my previous videos, you will find that I talked about this in many episodes and showed you the evidence. I mean, many months ago, I said that the war would be before 2030 or exactly in 2030. European countries made deals and launched military programs, and they accelerated all these programs to be ready before 2030. There is a serious acceleration of all military programs. Why? Because this is the likely date for this major war against the Russians in that year. Everything must be ready by then for this war. They want to be prepared for this war on all levels, even on the public level. Because now they are preparing the European peoples to accept and cope with what is coming, with the worst that awaits them today. There is a statement by the head of the German Council for Constitution and Sovereignty. His name is Ralph Namer. What did he say? He said that the leadership of the Western countries, the European NATO countries, are today exactly imitating the Third Reich in terms of their approach to this goal of destroying Russia. But he said that they will face the same failure that happened back then. And he said that the current German Minister of Defense had publicly stated that the country is preparing for war against Russia, and that he used the same phrases that Germany used back then before World War II. It's as if history is repeating itself, but with different names this time. One of the strange things happening today is the emergence of major disagreements between Ukraine and its allied countries in Europe. And this might lead to other directions, meaning that perhaps at the decisive moment there could be changes at the level of alliances. For example, what is happening today between Ukraine and Poland is truly strange. After they used to be very close, now there is a war of words between the two. The Polish parliament speaker made a statement today saying that Poland will not allow Ukraine to join the European Union. Pay close attention. This was something the Prime Minister of Hungary used to say. It's well known and controversial. Viktor Orban was always the one who stood against Ukraine joining the European Union, and he admits it and says it openly. About a month ago or a little more, there was a change in the Hungarian government and Viktor Orban left. Today, Poland is the one saying it will not allow Ukraine to join the European Union. The Polish parliament speaker said there are Polish conditions that Ukraine must meet if it wants to join the European Union. And of course, these conditions will be impossible. Recently as well, the president of Poland withdrew an honor he had previously given to the Ukrainian president Zelensky. Before that, for the sake of dignity, Zelensky had honored individuals whom Poland considers responsible for the Volhynia massacre, which took place in 1943. It is said that 100 Polish villages were exterminated by the Ukrainians, so there was also a Ukrainian move after that. Zelensky recently participated in the reburial of one of the leaders of the army that carried out this massacre in Poland at the time, what was called the Ukrainian Liberation Army back then. Moreover, Zelensky started calling them heroes. I mean, officially and publicly he calls them heroes. He named a Ukrainian military center in northern Ukraine after the heroes of the Ukrainian Liberation Army. Ukrainians see that this liberation army was heroic and deserves to be honored, because they resisted the Nazis and the Soviet Union at that time, meaning during World War II, while Poland calls it the Ukrainian Insurgent Army. Why? Because it was involved in massacres against Polish civilians. In addition, there are people in Poland who also accuse it of the opposite, that he actually collaborated with the German Nazis during certain stages of the war. The important thing is that the relationship between Poland and Ukraine has seriously deteriorated. It has deteriorated significantly. They even say today that there is a special kind of war going on, between Poland and Ukraine, and they call it a war. The medals. Why do they call it that? Because they started withdrawing and giving up the medals, between the two sides. And this is probably just the beginning, because this relationship is deteriorating very quickly. And it is approaching the point of no return, where in the end they will announce a break and hostility, and maybe the language of alliances will change. The Ukrainian President Zelensky attacked the President of Poland, and tried as much as possible to link these disagreements to this president personally, as if the disagreements have nothing to do with the state, nothing to do with the two countries. Because the President of Poland is the one who bears the responsibility. He said that he is not a king. The President of Poland said that his responsibility, he said about the President of Poland that he is not a king. A king will not remain in power in Poland forever, he said. In a statement, he said that Poland cannot be safe without Ukraine. He said that Ukraine is defending Poland, just as it is defending all of Europe. He also said that Ukraine and Poland share the same fate, and by the reality of the situation, they are destined to be friends and partners and so on. He said this escalation could worsen and the situation is more dangerous. He tried to show, as I said, that the reason for the disagreements is not the steps he took, despite what happened, as I told you. Rather, it is the President of Poland who bears all this responsibility. But all the leaders of Poland stand behind the President of Poland. In fact, even more than that. And even a former spokesperson for Zelensky criticized Zelensky and said that he was foolish for entering into a conflict against the country that is the biggest supporter of Ukraine. She said that the Ukrainian Territorial Defense Forces were never a national symbol for Ukraine. It's as if she's sending a message. Why is Zelensky acting this way? For making them heroes and symbols of patriotism with historical arguments that even Ukrainians themselves don't believe in. So if this disagreement continues, it could really develop to a stage where priorities change, the language of alliances changes, and so on. Another important development in this Russian-Ukrainian issue. There was actually a strange threat made by Zelensky to Belarus. This time, Zelensky threatened Belarus with war, threatened to move this military conflict into Belarusian territory. And the reason, dear viewers, he said that there are communication devices installed along the Ukrainian-Belarusian border, which Russia is currently using for military communications and communications with drones and so on. That is, because it attacked a number of Ukrainian border cities. Zelensky said that Belarus must remove these devices within just 1 week, otherwise there will be severe consequences for Belarus. That's what he said. Zelensky spoke as if he were the president of a great power, or as if he were victorious in this war against the Russians. And he has the weapons, equipment, missiles, and personnel that would allow him to open other battlefronts against other countries. So everyone wondered about the reason behind this fierce threat, to the point that he gave a 1-week deadline. Does Ukraine really want to open other battlefronts? Is it actually capable of doing that? According to what they say inside Ukraine, they believe that the Belarusian army is very weak and that Ukraine can achieve victories. I mean, along this entire front, if this front were to be opened, even if we assume this is true, that would be the case only if Belarus was alone. But everyone knows that Russia supports Belarus, and there are Russian forces and weapons and Russian missiles deployed in Belarus. Even nuclear weapons are now deployed in Belarus. Russian nuclear weapons. So how could Zelensky come out with this threat? What's interesting today is that everyone honestly is eager to see what will happen after this deadline. The deadline that Zelensky gave for the end of this week. Because Belarus, of course, will not pay any attention to these threats and will not remove these devices that are already on its territory. There is a sovereign right, so what will happen? I mean, we will see exactly what will happen. How will the Ukrainian intervention be? Will he really carry out this threat and open another front of fighting, or what? God willing, we will return to this topic. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Peace be upon you and God's mercy and blessings. See you next time.